Welcome back. Here with us on Urban Debate on Mirror Now, former Prime Minister of Sri Lanka, Ranil Wickremesinghe, who has just one seat in the 225-member Parliament of Sri Lanka, has become the new Prime Minister of Sri Lanka following the resignation of Mahindra Rajapaksa, with the country's largest opposition party refusing to join a government under the presidency of Korbaiya Rajapaksa. Wickremesinghe, a five-time Prime Minister of the country, was the only option, it seems. Let's straight away go across to Padma, my colleague joining us on the broadcast this evening. She is in Sri Lanka right now. Padma, good evening. Thank you for joining us live on Urban Debate this evening. Firstly, I want to ask you, how has been the reaction of the people of Sri Lanka of this big development? Because for him, the biggest challenge is going to be to win the trust, the confidence of the people of Sri Lanka.
Hi, good evening. This is Padma Rao from Colombo. This is an interesting question because I think it's still early days yet. The announcement came pretty, quite late this evening. But we were out filming in what is known as the Gogama village, where the activists and protesters are gathered. And we did speak to some activists, and they were saying that, they would have preferred it to go differently, and they don't really mind as long as they have some sort of an assurance that Korbaiya Rajapaksa, the president, will step down eventually. But we don't know that. I mean, that's not really clear yet. However, I did ask them how they feel about former Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe taking oath again. And they did say that, they were guarded, but they said that, even if the president does not step down immediately, if that's not a precondition for Prime Minister Ranil Wickremesinghe, then they would still go with it in order to give the new interim government a chance. So that's a good sign in one sense, because I think people are just fed up, of the shortages on the ground, and they want to see this government, whichever government comes into place, get on with it. Just a quick, correction to what was said earlier. It's not as if he was the only candidate. There were about 5 candidates, and the opposition leader, Mr. Sajit Premadasa, the leader of the opposition, in fact, did not actually refuse to join the government. He had refused initially, but today he held a press conference. I suppose he also felt, because his party is an offshoot of Mr. Ranil Wickremesinghe's United National Party. That's how his party was formed, Mr. Sajit's party. But Sajit immediately, so I suppose he felt a bit of competition, and he had a press conference today where he changed that earlier stance, and he said he would be willing to be Prime Minister and laid down 3 conditions. One, that President Korbaiya Rajapaksa resigns in the imminent future. 2, that elections are held when economic stability is restored. And third, there was another condition.
Right.
So there were, so there was a change of stance as far as the Mr. Sajit Premadasa is concerned, because up to now it seemed, as you rightly pointed out, since the UNP has only 1 seat in Parliament, Ranil Wickremesinghe's party, it did seem as if Sajit Premadasa was a likely candidate, because he was really at the forefront of all the protests, not the protests on the streets, but he was, quite vociferous about asking for the resignation of President Gotabaya.
All right, Padma, appreciate you joining us, and thank you very much for putting things in perspective for our viewers. We'll, of course, be coming back to you again for the latest from Sri Lanka. Let's now move on, and joining us on the broadcast this evening is Chamara Sumanapala, writer and analyst, Professor Asanga, who is a strategic advisor, also joining us on the broadcast this evening. Good evening to both of you. Thank you for joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Chamara Sumanapala, I want to begin the discussion with you. Now, Ranil Wickremesinghe has become the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka 6th time, and he's got his task cut out. What is it that you are now expecting?
I think the people are expecting that something tangible would happen. There were a few days of uncertainty with no government there. The Prime Minister resigned on the 9th, and has been 3 or 4 days without a Prime Minister. So people wanted some stability. People wanted some, some things to happen, because the crisis is growing day by day, and there's no let up. I mean, the situation is growing worse day by day. So people on one hand wanted some solution. They wanted someone to step in and, to accept this challenge and to try and go forward. On the other hand, of course, there are certain issues with Ranil Wickremesinghe. People sometimes do not trust him. because of some of the allegations that have been leveled against him in the past. On the other hand, there's a sense that he would be able to get the international support. A lot of people do agree on that point, but whether he'll be able to continue this for a long period, that's a different matter. On the other hand, at the so-called Gotagogama, the protests are going on because those people, the protesters, are demanding the president to resign. And of course, if this has to become meaningful, this should not be limited to the resignation of the president. There has to be reforms. There has to be the executive presidency has to go. So there are lots of other things that have been discussed. But foremost, I think there is a sense of instability, and you need something to stabilize the situation.
Okay, Professor Asanga Abeyagoonasekera, do you think this is that one thing that people of Sri Lanka will accept and the situation will get stabilized? Because people have been out on the streets demanding the resignation of the president too. A condition, in fact, that has now been put forward by the opposition leader as well. Where do you see things moving from here?
I can agree with Tamara, who spoke before me. The stability is the most important thing, because if you look at the daily lives have been affected. There are no food. People are having only one meal a day. So there will be long power cuts if this goes on. So stability is the most important. The US ambassador has clearly mentioned this, supporting Ranil Wickremesinghe's appointment as the prime minister. The stability is the most important thing. But like Tamara said, I mean, here's a person who has one seat in the parliament. Usually the prime minister has to be the most, the popular as well as the most accepted person from the parliament. So here, where Rajapaksa political party will support the prime minister, newly appointed prime minister. So it's kind of first time in the Sri Lankan political history that this sort of arrangement is happening. The arrangement will have ripple effects to the protesters, because the protesters' demands are not met. The first demand was the president's resignation, and then corruption. So I don't think there would be investigations against the Rajapaksa family or the regime. So there will be multiple challenges for the new prime minister. But stability is something that the new prime minister should bring, with all the parties together right now, because here is a country with less than, I would say, 40 million foreign reserves, which is not enough for the next week.
Okay. Well, absolutely. Stability is the need of the hour. And Mr. Sumanapala, the point is that will people accept Ranil Wickremesinghe as their new prime minister? Will we see a cabinet formation tomorrow, going by the kind of reactions we've got from other leaders from Sri Lanka?
Yes, that is actually something that we have to see in the future. We have to see what will happen. I think, as Professor Abeyagoonasekera mentioned, the government party will support Mr. Wickremesinghe as far as the things are at this moment. But then going forward, long term, what will happen, we never really know. On the other hand, the main opposition party, the Samagi Janabalawega, is also having their own problems. Some of the MPs have said that they are going to come independent, and then they might join, maybe they might join a new government. Maybe the government would be able to establish a majority in the parliament in the short run. Whether that will be sustainable in the long run is a different matter. That will depend on the economic situation and all that. And of course, on the other hand, the president is still there, so the protesters will not be happy. So that side is also another problem that we have to see what will happen in the future.
Okay, Professor Asanga, I want to give you the last word. Now, as far as Ranil Wickremesinghe is concerned, he is seen as a pro-West free market reformist, potentially making bailout negotiations with IMF and others smoother. So, you think that can be one of the reasons why the opposition MPs might lend their support to him?
Yes, what is required right now is actually all parties coming together supporting the people here, because the economy is crashing. You can see a crashing economy. It's already crashed. So I think the best option right now is to support and stabilize the country, because if it goes, I mean, it is already going to a military footing. It was very close, but I'm happy that it's moving to a more democratic process. But you need the support from the public, also from all the parties. But the Cardinal and many others have said this model, there is questions, but then we need to find some solutions. I mean, it's a challenging environment. For the first time, Sri Lanka is having all these challenges, but then we need to see. I mean, Ranil Wickremesinghe, like you said, he has this liberal as well as market reform, mindset, which he can easily implement the IMF, the processes and
right.
whatever that is.
Well, absolutely. Thank you very much, both of you gentlemen. Appreciate you joining us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now this evening. Interesting developments are taking place in Sri Lanka, and Mirror Now is going to keep you ahead on everything that's happening in Sri Lanka, which is facing its worst economic crisis right now. With this, it's a wrap. Thank you very much for staying with us here on Urban Debate on Mirror Now. Heading into a short break, Griha joins you next with the day's top stories. Stay with us.